Welcome to Beccaro and Hook, Enlightened Dissent. I am Steve Hook. There's my partner, Tom Beccaro. We are thrilled to be with you again. We remind you to check us out on Rumble, check us out on YouTube, patriot.tv/DHED, and of course, our good friends over at Ex American News and Uncensored American News as well. I mean, we're pretty much everywhere. And if you're wondering, well, how do I find these links? Go to DellAndHook.com, DellAndHook.com. Right down here, click that, and you'll find all of our links, and you'll also find all of our shows from weeks past. Speaking of, man, what a past week it's been, Tom. It has been an amazing week. Trump is just on. I don't know what he puts in his coffee cup, but that guy is really active. Yesterday, he was all over the place. He stops. He leaves D.C., and unlike Biden, he stops, he talks to the press scrum for a while, fields any and all questions, then says, goodbye, we're going to help some folks in North Carolina. Oh, and then, by the way, we're going to hit over to California and talk to them as well. It was an amazing day yesterday, a whirlwind of activity, and he ends up back in the White House to go to bed after visiting North Carolina, California, stops in Nevada. I mean, just amazing. What do you think about the first week, Tom?
Well, for, I don't know, a year or so, I've been talking about this will be the shortest presidency because he's already a, quote, lame duck. And he has a very short timeline to get things done. And Donald Trump is a guy who keeps to a schedule. He has a to-do list. He requires people to be responsible for their actions, and things get done because people are held accountable. It doesn't work like the government. Oh, we should study the study. No, that's not his gig. His gig is, we're doing this, and we're doing this today. And you tell me why we can't do it today, but more importantly, you over there, you tell me all the ways we're going to do it. He firmly believes that Rome wasn't built in a day, but it was built, and there's a way to build things. And so the great thing about it is, as we've talked about, the incredible contrast from the, I don't know, what do you want to call them? The losers that were in charge the last 4 years who thought that government was the solution to everything when it hasn't been the solution to virtually anything. And look, he's a man on a mission, and with a different demeanor. I'll note you saw in that meeting with in Los Angeles with Mayor Bass sitting next to him. That he just has a different demeanor. By the way, since we've ventured off to California, I must say. That was the least dignified existence I've ever seen, with Gavin Newsom with his hands in his back pocket on the tarmac, and looking like some teenager in trouble waiting for daddy to come down the stairs.
Yeah.
First of all, Gavin, put some clothes on when you meet the President of the United States. Okay? Dignity matters. Dignity is a part of leadership. That's number one. Number two, if you're going to ask for help, then you should come with an open mind about how you can improve what's going on. So far, I've yet to hear Gavin Newsom say how he's going to change policy. And so my thing is, and I've been saying this for weeks now, ever since it started, on average, 954,000 acres burn in California every year. So here we are about to have this massive, and I mean massive, bailout. What's to stop it happening again next year, and the year after, and the year after?
Yeah, good
Grace of God. So when are they going to change? Apparently not at all. And so nothing's going to get better. You're just going to bail them out every year.
Well, Trump did say that he's going to sign an EO that basically frees up water to come from Northern California down to Southern. But if you've got people like Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass that are basically standing in the way, At some point, Tom, you're a California, you're an ex-California resident or still currently there part-time. At what point do Californians, even in these deep blue cities in California, at what point do they throw up their hands and say, screw this, throw them out, and let's try a new plan? Trump is trying to tell them that. He basically called out Karen Bass right to her face, which was nice to see. At what point do Californians say enough of the stupid Delta smelt? Is that going to happen?
Well, 70% of Californians rejected Gavin's advice in the last election and voted for the tough on crime bill. Gavin was against that. Kamala Harris was gutless, but it was obviously she was against that. All of the Democrats in Sacramento, they were all against it. Adam Schiff was against it. So at some level, they've started that process. How far will it go? Well, if we have someone who runs and says, here's my opposing plan to wildfires, here's my opposing plan to a fish that's non-existent, then you're going to take you'll see more progress. But in order for politics to turn, you need an alternative. And so far, the Republicans in the state haven't been bold enough with that alternative.
Well, that's a perfect jumping off point to this first clip, because you mentioned how stark the contrast is between Biden and Trump. It is very stark indeed. I think we can all pretty much come to grips with the fact that Biden wasn't running anything. Biden was a figurehead. It looks like there was a cabal of lefties that were running the show. Trump, on the other hand, goes to North Carolina yesterday. He stopped there. Makes sense travel-wise to stop there before California. But he stopped there first because he rightly saw that that North Carolina and the Appalachian region that was so devastated by Hurricane Helene was shown short shrift from the Biden administration. So Trump wanted to fix that, and he went there. And here's an example of the contrast between these two men. He gets up on stage. He says, we're going to help you. And then he says, why don't you step up on stage, turning to the victims of this horrible disaster, Helene, and says, why don't you come up here and tell us your stories? I just want you to see this, Tom, to understand, to really underscore the difference in these men's way of doing things. And he cut one.
So when the hurricane storms hit North Carolina, hit our home, my brother and my wife and I were actually out of town. But unfortunately, my dad, who was still home, and my mother was staying at our house with our animals. And the waters got so high that it actually lifted between that and the tornado that came through, or microburst is what they've been calling them, and lifted his home and the house that I grew up in and crashed it into our barn. It took away his business. It took away all of our tools and tractors and everything needed to keep the farm going. And my mother was trapped in the house, and there was no way to escape because the water got so high. The only thing she could do was ride it out and wait till the waters came down.
Wow. Okay, well, the bottom line here, Tom, is he's allowing them to tell his story, their own stories in their own words. And you just hear that. Here's a guy that obviously owns he's a family farm. His home is blown off its foundations, blown into the barn. That in turn destroys all of his farm equipment, blows out all of it. So now he's got no home, no farm, no source of income, and Biden sat on his hands. And the Biden administration sat on their hands. FEMA, you remember the big kerfuffle? FEMA putting in internal memos saying if they have a Trump sign on their lawn, ignore them, move on. It's, what people are bitching about Trump, saying he may want to get rid of. Why would Trump get rid of FEMA? Well, I can give you a couple of reasons. Take a look at North Carolina. Once again, we were talking yesterday on the program about how how the U.S. citizen has lost faith in so many of our major institutions. Add FEMA to that list. When you see internal memos saying ignore our political enemies, which is basically the entire Appalachian region, it's no wonder they got short shrift. Trump lets the guy talk, And when he was done talking, Trump said, "What's the name of your insurance company?" Put them on blast. And Trump is going to help these people. And they felt it too, because when they were done with this presser, they were specifically asked, "What do you think?" And they were all couldn't have been more appreciative, saying, "We finally feel heard." Big difference, huh, Tom?
Yeah, big difference. Part of that difference is that because Biden was so Biden, they would never risk such lack of control over a moment, right? He just doesn't. Biden wouldn't have known what to do at the moment in time. Wouldn't have known how to respond. Wouldn't risk criticism, but Trump's not afraid of that.
Yeah.
And Trump's there for the people. You know, the reason why the elites don't like Trump is because Trump doesn't care about the elites. Trump is an elite monetarily, but his reality is that he wants the average person to succeed, and the elites don't give a damn about that by and large, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be building fortresses to put themselves behind while crime runs rampant everywhere else. And then when Trump shows up to a place like California and you see him sit down, and I said this Newsmax the other day, was like a master class. You have all those people in the room, he's calling upon them, he's drawing them out, saying, okay, but you know, I don't want it to, you know, you got to let those people come clean it up. And I don't want to hear about that, you know, there's hazardous waste, therefore you're going to hire a state contractor and there's a long list and this is going to blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's just natural to him. And again, Biden couldn't have been in that room either because he wouldn't have been able to engage. So the difference is you have someone who's engaged, who's capable of being engaged, who's a elite who doesn't give a damn about elites and is going to go out there and fix things.
A leader.
There you go. He's a CEO, not an ideologue.
Yeah.
He has a to-do list and he's going to get it done, which is a radical difference.
Yeah, huge difference. Listen, we've got a great show today. Our friend Frank Gaffney is going to join us. We're going to talk about globalism and how where it goes from here now that Trump is in office. We're going to talk about Davos. We're going to talk about what's going on in Gaza, Islam, and the threat that it still poses to the world. So a big show. Thanks for joining us on Del Beccaro and Hook. We take a short break. We remind you before we leave, though, make sure you check out our landing page, delandhook.com, delandhook.com. Find all the links there. We will be right back with Del Beccaro and Hook with Frank Gaffney coming up right after this.
Welcome back, everybody, to Del Beccaro and Hook. Please share our Del and Hook landing page. But today I'm particularly excited to be able to discuss the world with the one and only Frank Gaffney. I don't want to date both of us here, Frank, but the reality is I first started listening to you way back in the Reagan days. You were Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear Forces and Arm Control Policy, a small matter such as that. And of course, you have been the founder of the Center for Security Policy for, well, you were the founder, and that's been around since the 80s as well. And you've perhaps a different badge of honor is the ire you have created for some on the left for your insistence about really a policy of America standing up to what's going on with respect to certain Islamic trends in the world, if you will. Is that a diplomatic way to put it? But I've always appreciated your clarity. And so I'm particularly excited with you here today in such an auspicious moment. I mean, the world has turned a bit, hasn't it? If you recall, during the Biden administration, the globalism scene was going to come back into fashion in some great particular way. The Washington Post famously said a month after the 2020 election that we are in a new era of globalism. And then we weren't, or that's the question. We've seen President Trump on the ascent again. He was rather direct at Davos, and Argentina's Milei was even more direct. He doesn't take any prisoners whatsoever. So in history, there's always this desire of these grand masters who want us to conform to their centralized vision, and that if only we'll submit our freedoms to them, we will be safer. Franklin warned us about that long ago. So my question to you is someone who has studied this for decades. Where are we right now? Is globalism slayed for once and for all? Is it just on the decline temporarily? Will freedom reign? What's your thoughts?
Well, first, thank you for having me. Second, just an administrative update. I have recently started a new organization called the Institute for the American Future, and I'm speaking about these issues from that platform. Well, it's not a quibble. I think it is a clarification to something you said, though, at the outset, Tom. I think part of the world has changed very dramatically. It's an important part of the world. It's the United States of America. And what we've seen just in the first week or so of President Trump's second term is that has implications for much of the rest of the world. But as to the issue of globalism, I think it would be folly to believe that it has been slain, or even that it is out of business temporarily. I think what we're witnessing is a decided setback to the globalists and their agenda. Had Kamala Harris been elected instead of Donald Trump, we would be well on our way, I think, to the end of sovereignty in our country, world government, which the Biden-Harris team aggressively worked towards during their time, as did Barack Obama before them. And I think what we've gotten is, at the very least, a stay of execution on that agenda. The question is, can Donald Trump, hopefully with a 4-year term and maybe J.D. Vance following on, have enough time to really slay this dragon, to really push it back to the point where everyone realizes that it is the antithesis of freedom. It will be a terminal arrangement for our constitutional republic and all that we enjoy as a result of it, and that we would wind up being enslaved by those who think that they are the masters, that they know better, that they will, in completely unaccountable, unelected positions, dictate everything to us. That's the question, and it's obviously too early to say, but I think that the president has gotten off to a very good start, and I pray that he will be successful, not just for the near term, but for the longer term as well.
You know, Frank, you talk about, you said the word enslaved, and I'm always amazed by people who, it's the frog in the water concept, who don't seem to grasp how much they are restricted. We see some of this with the EV mandates, saying that this is the kind of car that you're gonna buy, even though there isn't the infrastructure for it, even though it doesn't work under significant circumstances. By the way, I always tell people, when the presidential motorcade is required to be an EV, then you give me a call, right? Because that'll never happen, because it needs to work, right? But, there's an issue out there which could demonstrate how quickly this control would be, and that would be the digital money. I mean, how easily it would be for them to say you can't access your money or you're not allowed to buy something else. So even though for most Americans who still go to the grocery store or otherwise and don't pay attention, in the technological age, we're not that far from incredible restrictions.
Not at all. And I appreciate you putting it in those stark terms, Tom. I think that what we've witnessed over the past few years has been tremendous strides made in terms of essentially establishing globally, including in our own country, something that is at the very least the infrastructure for, if not the full on character of, the Chinese Communist Party's social credit system, whereby you have a digital ID. On that digital ID is whatever information they want about you. It can be as simple as, your driver's license, or it can be everything, including your health data, your personal banking arrangements, where you work, your social media presence and network, and all the rest. And once that platform exists, and it could look a lot like, the real ID, which we're told now we're going to have by May 25. Remains to be seen if that'll be the case or not. But whatever it is, that kind of infrastructure is now present here. And by the way, one of the things that the Biden-Harris folks were so keen on was getting through the World Health Organization and through an amendment to the International Health Regulations, a treaty to amend it, as well as the so-called Pact for the Future of the UN, both of which were very, very aggressively supported by the Biden team.
Yeah,
that infrastructure is upon us, and will at some point, unless we take steps to prevent it, be weaponized in precisely the way you're talking about, precisely the way we've seen the Chinese do it towards their own people, enslaving them, and controlling them, and perhaps as well weaponizing them, including against us.
Frank, welcome to the program. It's so great to see you again.
Good to see you, Steve.
Yeah, this kind of harkens back a little bit to the dawn of Obamacare. And I remember going on my old radio program and saying over and over again, till I beat my head up against the wall, saying, look, man, if the government controls your access to health care, the government controls you.
Correct.
And the left in this country, the Democrat Party, has moved decidedly to the left. That's no secret. But they're pushing it. Not only will you abide by what we say concerning Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, the most nonsensical name ever, but we're also gonna hand off part of this responsibility to world bodies. That is a scary proposition, and it really kind of underscores just how dumbed down our country has become. I don't know if I guess it's many factors, multiple factors, college Marxist professors, what's going on in our public school systems. But it does seem like Trump kind of re-enlivened the spirit of liberty with this last election. And that's why I guess Tom is saying, is it just temporarily sidelined? But we're going to have to really stay on this, and we're going to need an engaged citizenry to avoid this, because I'm convinced that what's going to end this wonderful republic that we have is going to be voter apathy and voter ignorance. And this plays right into that, doesn't it?
100%. Tom used the metaphor, which I think is so apt, of the frog being boiled in the pot of water that is just incrementally tightened up. I personally believe that this is not so much voter apathy as the other thing you refer to, voter ignorance. And partly that's because, I kind of think of it as a vicious cycle, if you will. The leaders of our country, and I'm not talking about the radical leftists and their agenda, I'm talking about the Republicans, the people who are supposedly on our side, working for us, representing us, they tend to think that their voters don't care about this stuff. Why don't they care about it? Maybe they think they don't care about it because they never hear about it from them. But why they don't hear about them is because their leaders typically don't know much about this stuff and don't talk to them about the problem. And I can tell you, one of the things we started this new Institute for the American Future to do is to support some terrific organizations that I've been proud to be associated with, one of the most impressive of which really is something called the Sovereignty Coalition. And this outfit stood up about 2 years ago, just started raising the alarm about what is being done. Incrementally, yes. Mostly stealthily, yes, but nonetheless inexorably to reduce our national sovereignty in favor of world government. And that's not my term, by the way. That's the term of the globalists, and Davos was mentioned in the Chinese Communist Party. And a third element of totalitarian globalism, by the way, I call it Sharia supremacism. And each of those three groups has a different kind of totalitarian end state in mind, to be sure, but they have one thing in common right now, and that's getting rid of us. And all of these treaties, the Pact for the Future at the UN, the IHR treaties and the WHO and so on, all of these have that common purpose. And most of our leaders, honestly, I can tell you this from hard firsthand experience, most of our leaders have no idea that any of that stuff is going on. So our coalition, I think, helped raise the alarm and get more people, governors, attorneys general, senators engaged on it. And I think that did help Donald Trump decide that this was an issue that he wanted to campaign on. He wanted to make a platform. And I noticed that in the inaugural address just a few days ago, he spoke of our sovereignty not once but twice, and he's done so in his executive orders and so on, including, of course, saying, we're getting out of the World Health Organization, praise be to God. And that has helped, I think, in turn, what might have been apathetic American voters not only not be apathetic, but give him a mandate to do just that sort of thing.
Yeah, I've always, forever, I've said that if people only knew what their government was doing, they would vote against it. And there's this great asymmetry in history for those who favor government versus those who favor freedom, because those who favor government are on the inside with it, and those who favor freedom are in the private sector, and they're working 8 to 10 hours a day, and then they say, "Can you believe?" But so this is not a new thing, but I've always decried, I think you'll join me in this, is the failure of the right, those who believe in freedom, to do what just you were describing. This, you've got to let people know what's going on in this world right now, and how you're being circumvented and restricted. And during the Biden administration, I thought, Frank, and I loved your thoughts on this, it was a very interesting dynamic because, the deep state, which I tell people not to use that phrase because it's not very deep, right? It's right there in our face.
Increasingly. No.
But yes, this branch of this illicit branch of the government's doing all these things. And lo and behold, we had a president who was doing nothing, and you could focus on the fact that all these things were occurring despite what should have been our Republican form of government.
Well, look, it wasn't so much that he wasn't doing anything on this; it was just he wasn't there.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
We still don't know who was running things. I mean, this is just unbelievable. But whoever was running things was doing something. That is, in this case of these various treaties, for example, they were actively, as I say, giving these international organizations ideas, or giving them money, or giving them, our voting authority to move forward on this world government business. And I would just say, all of this would have been probably almost incomprehensible to Americans. But we did have one thing going for us in making these arguments. And I think ultimately it proved decisive, along with that leadership piece, of course, Donald Trump's not least.
Yeah.
And that is, the old expression about a conservative is a liberal who's been mugged by reality. Well, a couple 100 million of Americans were mugged by the reality of COVID, and they saw what this globalist stuff was all about, and they saw that it did, in fact, enslave them.
Yeah, and Trump was very good at pointing it out, I think, we could, when we look back at this campaign through the lens of history, I think what we're going to say, at least to me, my takeaway is he gets up after he's been shot, blood streaming in his face, raises his fist in defiance and says, "Fight, fight, fight." Then you juxtapose that with Biden tripping over a sandbag and landing on his face and having to be helped up. Then you've got the garbage truck. Then you've got the McDonald's. It was a brilliantly run campaign, and it resonated with a lot of people, and here we are today. Let me ask you, though, Frank, one of the things that we're talking about, and this is your area of expertise, is what's going on in Gaza. Hamas and Israel have been going back and forth for a while. I think Israel is completely in the right here. The media doesn't tell this story truthfully. In fact, we're hearing, this ceasefire. Explain to us how what's happening in Gaza isn't so much a ceasefire, but it's a hudna or a hudna or whatever. I don't even understand what this word means. Maybe you can walk us through what's actually happening. We know they released 4 female IDF soldiers today. Thank God for that. But they've still got a lot. So what is happening in Gaza, and what is your prediction going forward?
Thanks for the question. I am a fan, as you may have gathered, of Donald Trump. But I am sorry to say I think he made a terrible misstep before he even got to office. And I'm not laying the blame directly at his feet. I think he wanted, a la Reagan, my old boss, to have as one of the wonderful departure points for his inauguration that he had freed the hostages, much as Reagan did, not by action, but by just force of his coming to office in Iran back in 1981. It was not to be. What was to be, and what he got as a result of this fellow Steve Witkoff, an old friend of his, a businessman, financial guy, real estate guy, who sort of parachuted in and immediately, I believe, was seduced by 2 forces. One, the Biden team. I mean, they essentially just sort of like zombies took over his body, but also Qatar, for whom he has long worked, it turns out. And what they came up with to try to get the hostages released was basically the strategy that the Biden administration had propounded back in May of last year, namely that Hamas would dribble out some of these hostages in exchange for huge numbers of terrorists, convicted, murderous terrorists in Israeli jails, and also essentially agreeing to arrangements that would give Hamas not only an ability to survive the Israeli onslaught, started on basically October 7th in the wake of this horrific attack mounted by the jihadis of Hamas against Israel, and that has thus far brought Hamas to the point of being defeated, but not quite there. And this deal was designed to save Hamas and thereby to defeat Israel. And the basis upon which it is best described as a hudna, which is an Arabic term for something Muhammad practiced. So this is, revered as, Islamic doctrine. When you are losing a fight, don't surrender, don't give up, do a deal with the stronger party. And you will use the time that gives you to regroup, to rearm, and then to renew the war under circumstances favorable to you, which is exactly what Muhammad did and exactly what the Hamas guys are trying to do right now. And unfortunately, if Israel, pursuant to this so-called ceasefire and the dribbling out of a few more hostages, in exchange for, again, thousands of these jihadis who are going to replenish the ranks of Hamas, probably both in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria as well, by the way, which is now an active war zone under Hamas and other jihadi emphasis. You're going to see Hamas regrouping, Hamas rearming, and Hamas not only declaring victory, but actually securing the victory over Israel. And this should stop right away. I personally believe that Steve Witkoff should be shown the door. The president now has his first string in place. You know, Marco Rubio at State, Mike Waltz, of course, at the NSC, Pete Hegseth, thanks be to God, at the Pentagon, John Ratcliffe at CIA, the gal at DHS, Christy No. You have now people who can take over and run this thing properly, all of whom I believe are of a mind that Israel must be victorious. And not just because the survival of the Jewish state is on the line, but because they're fighting our enemies as well.
Yeah.
And if they fail to defeat them decisively, you will see every, I call it Sharia supremacist on the planet, emboldened and redoubling their effort to come after us as well as the rest of the free world.
And who knows how many of them are here right now?
And they're Boku Lung. We know that there are about 70 to 100,000 of them that Biden legally brought in from Afghanistan. Those weren't people who were helping us in Afghanistan. Those were Taliban. And they're
Right,
here,
so-
and God only knows how many others.
So Frank, I agree with you that this is quite fraught, giving them this deal, meaning it certainly affords Hamas an ability to recover. To what extent do you think Trump was thinking that if we defund Iran, and we're running short of time, if we defund Iran, Hamas's ability to regroup will be so diminished that we can ultimately succeed anyway?
Well, maybe yes, maybe no. First, it's the if, you have to actually defund and defeat Iran and liberate it. I mean, that's the key thing is not with our force of arms, but with this combination of what the Israelis do, what we could do with the funding and so on. But the concern I have is that if you allow 300,000 pro-Hamas Palestinians back into North Gaza, even if you attrit over time that terrorist group, you're going to find it a very, very dangerous situation for Israel, and quite possibly one that they don't actually prove victorious over. That's what I would not risk. We ought to just stop in place right now. You want a ceasefire in place. Everybody stays where they are. And I think preferably Israel finishes the job. That's what needs to be done here for them.
Yeah, and I have particular worry. I tell people Israel's in a race against technology. And what I mean by that is it's going to be increasingly easier every day of the week for Hamas to engage in very deadly attacks because technology makes it so much easier.
You bet. Drones alone. Yeah. And if they get the access to Egypt that would flow from this deal that they had before, the tunnels and everything else, they will have access to all of that technology, Tom. You're absolutely right. And we mustn't let that happen.
So we've run out of time. Frank, I want to say that, the thing about being on defense is you have to win 100% of the time, and the bad guys only have to win once. And so to be good on defense, you have to be thoughtful, patient, and persistent. And I'm pretty sure that defines your career. And so that's why I've always appreciate. Again, I'm sorry to date you that I've been watching you and listening to you for
been a while.
How many decades? It's been a while.
Better part of 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you
So-
for remembering. It's been a long and checkered story, I guess, but I had the privilege of my life early on in my so-called career of working for a truly great president, Ronald Reagan, and I'm glad you were tuning in back then.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Thanks so much for watching Frank, and I hope you take what he says to heart. And we'll be back at Del Beccaro and Hook.
After a lifetime of hard work and smart investing, the last thing you want to worry about is losing your retirement savings. Hi, I'm Paul Stone, CEO of Colonial Metals Group. We specialize in helping hardworking Americans like you take back control of their financial future, safeguard their savings. In economic times like these, millions turn to physical precious metals as a form of insurance, while conventional investment choices face challenges or even collapse. If you have an IRA, 401k, or other type of retirement account, my team at Colonial Metals Group would like to help you build a financial protection plan outlining the most secure future for you. We've put together a free protection kit showing how you can start investing in precious metals 100% tax and penalty free to protect and grow your wealth. You can download it for free now by clicking the button below. Customers, we're very proud to say, across the country have been very impressed by my team's in-depth knowledge of financial history and their ability to listen to you. We hold the same conservative values you hold and ones our great nation was built on, and we can't wait to start helping you and working with you. Again, just click the button below to download our retirement protection kit for free now.
Welcome back to Del Beccaro and Hook, our third and final segment. By the way, this segment of the program brought to us by Colonial Metals Group, and we'll be telling you more about them in just a sec. Well, Tom, I thought Frank Gaffney is he's just a font of knowledge, and some of what he said, I really was encouraged by. Some of what he said, I was a little bit, oh boy, here we go again. But I think we've got the right team on the field here. This Wickoff guy kind of scares me, but now that you've got confirmation of Pete Hegseth over at DOD, you've got Rubio in its state, you've got Kirsty Nome coming up, you've got Tim Walz there, Director of Intelligence. I mean, I really think that he's getting the team around him now, and hopefully the damage will be, the wound shall be cured. I don't know what the hell I'm trying to say, but you get the point. And once he gets a better team, maybe he can get a firmer grasp on it.
Well, I definitely think that he believes that defunding Iran is going to solve a lot of problems. Look, at the end of the day, the bad actors in the world, the worst two baddest actors in the world are China and Iran.
Yeah.
Iran relies on China because without the sales to China of petroleum, Iran would go under, especially once Trump defunds them. So Trump's going to defund Iran, which will also hurt China, who's we've had guests in the past talk about the difficulty that China is under, including Brigadier General retired Blaine Hole. And so China's inability to get oil will hurt them as well. But we saw Trump this week call out China saying, you need to help with ending the Ukraine war. And what he meant by that is you need to stop buying Russian oil, which when another policy of Trump will be to lower oil prices, which will reduce Russian reserves and ability to fund their war. So a lot of these things are interconnected, but I think Trump believes that after a year of defunding Iran, these things will work out and Hamas won't be able to reassemble like it has in the past.
Yeah.
And I think he believes that freedom's on the march. And I know you're a fan of the president of Argentina, who
Milei.
takes no prisoners.
He does. I'm glad you mentioned it because it's a perfect segue. For one, I just want to echo everything you said about Iran, and especially the people, the long-suffering people of Iran are just waiting for a President Trump to come in there and do what he was got started in his first term. So we'll see how that plays out, because I really do think if you take those mullahs out, you take Iran out of the equation, so many of the problems in the Middle East and frankly the world get a lot better. But you mentioned Milei. We had talked about yesterday, Trump didn't even go to Davos. He said, I'm going to phone it in because I'm going to go see the people of North Carolina and California. I don't have time for these smug elites these folks in Davos that want to run everybody's life. So then Milei goes there yesterday. He did go. And if Trump basically said, we're putting America first, which is what his message was, Milei's message was not only is Argentina putting Argentina first, we're going to ignore all of you. And then he gave what I think is probably the most concise and accurate description of woke progressive policies and frankly globalist policies of anybody I've ever heard. Now, what you're going to hear now is not actually Milei, it's his interpreter. But listen to what he says right to the faces of Klaus Schwab and all these globalists. It's gorgeous. Go.
Is it not true that right now, as we speak, in the UK, citizens are being imprisoned for exposing horrifying crimes committed by Muslim migrants, crimes that the government seeks to conceal? Or didn't the bureaucrats in Brussels suspend Romania's elections simply because they didn't like the party that had won? Faced with each of these discussions, wokeism's first strategy is to discredit those of us who challenge these things, first by labeling us and then by silencing us. If you're white, you must be racist. If you're a man, you must be a misogynist or part of the patriarchy. If you're rich, you must be a cruel capitalist. If you're heterosexual, you must be heteronormative, homophobic, or transphobic. For every challenge, they have a label, and then they try to suppress you by force or through legal means. Because beneath the rhetoric of diversity, democracy, and tolerance that they so often preach, what truly lies is their blatant desire to eliminate dissent, criticism, and ultimately freedom, so they can continue to uphold a model in which they're the main beneficiary.
I mean, that is basically just saying, screw you, right in their face. They had nothing. They obviously they can't say anything. What do you think about that? I mean, that's Trumpian is what that is. And I credit Trump with a lot of Milei's success, and he does too. But man, that was a 1-2 punch. Trump one day, and then Milei comes in and slaps him around. What did you think?
Yeah, I'm like kind of surprised that they even show those videos. I mean, that'd be like me going to a Red Sox locker room and just laying into the Red Sox as a Yankee fan. I mean, why would they do that? By the way, I would never do that because that would be too high a risk. And so I wonder why it is that they even invite these guys to speak. But
they may not ever again.
Yeah, Milei is genius. He understands economics. He understands history. Argentina was told, the people of Argentina told, you can't succeed without government, and he proved that you can. And that's Trump's big fight here. Can he free up the country enough from government to bring back the success?
I hope he does. And, when we were talking to Frank just a bit ago, I made mention of the fact that my biggest fear is apathy and ignorance of the electorate. And he said, well, not so much apathy, but ignorance, yes. Well, this is what I'm talking about here. Milei, as you rightly point out, everybody said Milei is trying to get rid of the government. That's going to screw everybody over. Well, it ended up helping everybody. What I find so puzzling about the left, Tom, and maybe you can help me understand this, as far as they're concerned, government is benevolent. Government is the answer to all your woes. And the only caveat there is they have to control every single aspect of government so they can make your life better. And if anyone else comes in there, like a Trump, or for that matter, going back a few years, a Romney or a Bush, well, guess what? They're Hitler. So the government's great, providing that they are the only ones that have anything to do with controlling it. Doesn't make sense on its face.
Well, history, that's the argument, one of the arguments of history. And for those on the left, there's two sets of them. The cynical, who just want to control people, that would be the Hillary Clinton. The naive, who think government actually can work, that would be the AOCs of the world, who see wrongs and therefore they need to be righted, believing that the human experience is perfectible, which it isn't. As the great Thomas Sowell said, there's trade-offs. If you're going to put money in one direction, there's a trade-off. If you provide people with so much welfare that they're disincentivized, you've created that trade-off. And of course, that's what happened after the 1960s. But you can't educate these people. There's a great video, which people can Google, of Milton Friedman arguing with Teddy Kennedy about the failures of socialism. And Teddy Kennedy famously says, well, they never had me before. And those are the cynical who believe that they should be in charge. And again, there's the AOCs who, and so many people who have no understanding of basic economics or what socialism's true record in history is, which you don't redistribute wealth, you redistribute poverty over time. And that's where America is today. That's the argument today. And what Milei did was, I'm frankly shocked that he was able to do this so quickly, meaning not that what he did wouldn't work, but that he was able to pull all those levers and create that dynamic. I think it'll be harder for Trump.
Yeah, it's going to be harder for Trump because we've got a much bigger bureaucracy. I know you
and a media and public employee unions.
Exactly, and academia and all the other levels of levers of the social apparatus that they control. I think that they've lost a lot of that power with this latest election, and we'll see where it goes from here. You mentioned Thomas Sowell; he's genius. You can go back to Thomas Hobbes and look at this. You can go back to Plato. I mean, these are all issues that these people talked about, whether it's Plato's Republic, the Leviathan, or whatever. And all of it basically comes down to the same thing, doesn't it, Tom? A big, ever-encroaching government is not a good thing. And a lot of people have lost sight of that, but this last election proves that maybe we're not completely lost in the wilderness. God, I hope not. Frank was great, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, by the way, Tom, we do have, as I mentioned, this segment is brought to us by Colonial Metals Group. We do know that even though Trump is in office, thank God he's in office, there's still things playing on the world stage. And I don't know about you, but I like to protect my assets. And the best way to do that is to own something that you can actually touch. Now, I'm not talking about Bitcoin or something that nobody quite understands that people try and explain to me. I want something that I can tactile touch. I'm talking about gold, silver, and you can get that from our friends at Colonial Metals Group. Here's our number, 888-544-5592. Let me repeat that, 888-544-5592. Go there, talk to some of these experts at Colonial Metals Group, and you get a little bit of assurance knowing that you've got something that never decreases in value, and it's always there for you. I don't know about you, but I'm more comfortable with a brick of gold as opposed to Bitcoin, which I still can't understand.
Well, there's a reason why gold's been around forever, but we got to wrap this show up. We want to thank everyone for joining us. More importantly, join our sponsors. Also, go to DellandHook.com and share this with your friends, because the more knowledge they have, the better all our chances will be. Thanks so much for tuning in to Beccaro and Hook, and we will see you soon.
Goodbye.
After a lifetime of hard work and smart investing, the last thing you want to worry about is losing your retirement savings. Hi, I'm Paul Stone, CEO of Colonial Metals Group. We specialize in helping hardworking Americans like you take back control of their financial future, safeguard their savings. In economic times like these, millions turn to physical precious metals as a form of insurance, while conventional investment choices face challenges or even collapse. If you have an IRA, 401k, or other type of retirement account, my team at Colonial Metals Group would like to help you build a financial protection plan outlining the most secure future for you. We've put together a free protection kit showing how you can start investing in precious metals 100% tax and penalty free to protect and grow your wealth. You can download it for free now by clicking the button below. Customers, we're very proud to say, across the country have been very impressed by my team's in-depth knowledge of financial history and their ability to listen to you. We hold the same conservative values you hold and ones our great nation was built on. And we can't wait to start helping you and working with you. Again, just click the button below to download our retirement protection kit for free now.